So why was it you were on the run that way, that people wouldn't let you birth, that no one would give you port?
I think that we really insulted the intelligence of the people wherever we went. We went in undercover. We lied to them continually about what we were up to. And as a result, we appeared to be there for suspicious reasons. And they, in some ports, particularly in Europe, they felt that we were the CIA, and we were attacked for that reason. When we came across into the Caribbean, the same rumor preceded us that we were a CIA ship. Then, in order to deflate the CIA rumor, Hubbard essentially admitted that we were involved with Scientology. And his reasoning was that by saying that we were involved with Science, we weren't really Scientology, we were managing Scientology. And Scientology, as you know, is opposed to the CIA, so we can't be the CIA. Well, what Scientology was also caused us a number of problems, and that also was why ultimately we lost the Caribbean ports. So we had to go somewhere. So Hubbard came up with the idea of setting up a land base. And it also was advantageous. He had come to realize that people were willing to pay astronomical sums of money to get close to him, to get auditing, in which he was supervising, to be close to the flagship itself. And so he saw that it could be a moneymaker to bring the whole operation ashore.
Okay. Was he happier in Florida than he'd been on the ship, or did he still feel kind of paranoid and persecuted?
Oh yeah, he was very paranoid and felt, I think, very persecuted during the Florida period. The Florida period for him was actually quite brief. We were at Daytona Beach for a couple of months, and then he moved to Dunedin, which is not far from Clearwater, and it was at first Daytona Beach, and then in Dunedin, where he really directed the setup of what became the Flag Land Base in Clearwater. But the base itself was under attack. Scientology was under attack. He was being looked for. His cover was blown, I think, by his barber or perhaps by his tailor in Dunedin, and he had to flee in probably February of 1976. So he was only there for just a couple of months. But it was a very troubling period for him. That was a period when I worked very closely with him. Our offices adjoined, and I saw him really very distraught on occasion. But I also observed that he met on a regular basis with Guardian's office personnel regarding the Clearwater operation, and that all of the Guardian's office dispatches and orders and so on about Clearwater went to him in his office in Dunedin.
Just tell me about that incident at Christmas. I'm trying to get across this feeling that he used to feel the world, he was carrying the world on his shoulders and he couldn't trust anybody else. And you're talking about that Christmas incident.
This was Christmas 1975, and we were at Dunedin, and we were both working that day. And he came out and was talking to me in my area, and I think there was a messenger there with me. We were working, and he was actually sobbing, somewhat blubbering, about how he has to do all the work and he's not going to get Christmas, and everybody else gets to take Christmas off, but not him. So
he really used to feel the world was on his shoulders, and despite the fact he was head of a huge organization as him.
Oh yeah, and you can read that in his material that he wrote about himself and his importance and why he was so much greater than anyone else, and how he needed to stir the soup and everyone was always failing him. That was an important facet of his character.
Now, moving on now to movie making, La Quinta. Why was it necessary for Hubbard to then be in so much deeper hiding and gone to La Quinta?
Well, he had fled Florida because his cover was blown in Florida, and then he lived in the Washington D.C. area for a few months, and I was then sent out to Culver City with 3 other messengers to set up a staging area in a Culver City apartment. The intention at that time was to purchase some properties in the desert, and they ended up being purchased in La Quinta. But it was so that he could operate and control Scientology while remaining undercover.
But why was he having to hide? Why was he on the run?
Well, at that time, there was a very big IRS investigation going on. And I think that he saw at that time the IRS, and there were also some other suits that the Guardian's office was involved in. And I don't recall the names of the suits. Maybe Goodrich. The Paulette Cooper matter was happening at that time. So he definitely wanted to be undercover. This predated by a little bit the FBI's raid on the organization in 1977, although by 1977, when that happened, he then fled from the La Quinta property and went to Sparks, Nevada, again to live more isolated from the organization because of the threat, at this time because of an FBI threat.
And was the threat really that he would be indicted? Is that essentially what he was running away from? Would be subject to hearing court?
Oh, certainly. Oh, yeah. It was only when Mary Sue assured him that he was not going to be indicted, and this was in large part because of her taking the fall, the Guardian's office people who were indicted and charged and subsequently convicted all getting together to deny that Hubbard was in control and in fact had originated Snow White. Once that was in place, then he felt that it was okay to return from Sparks to Gilman Hut or to La Quinta at that time.
Okay, so you now got Hubbard the movie maker. What was he like? What was it like when he was making movies? What was his character like?
Well, he was the director and he ran the whole thing. Unbeknownst to us at the time, the guy had written himself some $10+ million for these scripts, which we were going to shoot. We were all being paid Sea Org wages, but he was the guy who was in charge, and every day he would come onto the set, he would order everyone around. He was loud, belligerent, and sometimes quite stupid.
And what was even just describing to me, you talked to me about him striding around the set and the messengers running behind him with his chair and all. Just describe that sort of picture as he created as the great director.
Yeah, he had his director chair, and he was always surrounded by a group of messengers. This was the time when it was quite visible to everyone that there was a messenger there to hold his ashtray to catch his ashes when he flicked them. But he performed, I would say, like an imagined general would on a battlefield, giving very short, clipped, belligerent orders.
Now, Scientology is supposed to be about making people make the best of their abilities as an individual, although we all know city. But did he like people to shine? What happened when people shone and took the limelight away from him? I'm thinking about your Barnum and Bailey story.
If it reflected on him, and if he saw that someone's shining was something that he could take the credit for in some way, it was fine for someone to shine. But if it did not reflect on him, and if it appeared that someone was acting independently, acting free in some way, and showing their own creativity, their own spontaneity, he would come down very hard on someone for no apparent reason. But in my judgment, it was for that reason, that he was in fact uncertain of his own ability.
Gerry, can you tell me about what happened when you did the spoof voiceover? What happened to you as a result of that, and why you didn't mind that?
Well, Hubbard sent me to the RPF. I was assigned for joking. Joking was considered a complete no-no in the organization. And, I did it in complete innocence.
Tell me what you did, if you don't know what you did. Just tell me what you did and the consequences in it.
We were actually filming. This was something to show Hubbard, who was sick at the time. He was sick, and because he was sick, everyone got sent off to train. And at the end of the day, we were doing what he called a training film, just on some aspect of shooting films. And we had a guy set up and set down this camera rather rapidly, and I did the voiceover, and I announced it like a Barnum and Bailey announcer, ladies and gentlemen, sort of thing. And this went up to Hubbard, and he apparently blew his top and assigned the people who were involved in the shot, the director and me and the actor and whoever else there was. There were about 5 or 6 people. All were assigned to the RPF for joking.
And what does assigning to the RPF mean for you? What did that actually mean?
Well, that stay in the RPF was for 8 months. So that meant that whatever wages I was getting were chopped to a quarter. So I was making maybe $5 a week. And you're not allowed to talk to any of the crew. You have to run everywhere. You get to wear a black boiler suit all the time. And you have to stay in the RPF and do essentially slave labor until someone decides that you're okay to get out.
All right. What was Hubbard's physically and mentally like at this time?
Well, he was sick a lot of the time. He was not physically well. He was obese. He was very overweight. He didn't move very well. He appeared to be in considerable pain. He often had one of his arms in a sling. I think that was following his motorcycle accident, which it never really healed. But generally, he was quite miserable and physically sick.
What were his phobias like? Tell me about his phobias and what that meant for everybody.
Well, he had phobias about people, and he had phobias about things. He had phobias about dust. He had phobias about smells. He had phobias about sounds. So he would hear sounds that weren't there, and he would scream at the sound technician. And he would see things that weren't there, and he would scream at the people who were framing the shot. And he would smell smells that weren't there, and he'd have people rinse his clothing some 13 or 15 or however many times.
Okay, Gilman. Things got worse by Gilman, didn't they? He was in an even more vulnerable position. Why was he even more at risk at Gilman, and what did this necessitate?
Well, by the time Gilman began, at the time when he was supposed to arrive at Gilman, this would have been in early 1980. By that time, there were a number of civil cases which had been brought or threatened to be brought against him and against the organization. One of his messengers, Tanya Burden, had, I believe by that time, filed a lawsuit. The Lawrence Wallersheim lawsuit started around that time. And there were other litigation threats, and there was also the IRS threat at that time.
So to sum up, he was more at risk. What did that require from your point of view in terms of looking after it?
Well, Hubbard, when he really did not arrive to live on the property, and while we moved on to the Gilman Hot Springs property, he lived in an apartment complex in Hemet, which is some 5 or 6 miles away. He would occasionally arrive at the property, but under very tight security. He arrived in the back of a blacked-out van, and I was then responsible for his household staff at the Gilman property, and I was also responsible for his security when he arrived. So I would be notified in advance of his arrival and would be there to let him into a particular piece of the property which only he would arrive at. And so he had a house which we had renovated at the property, and he would arrive there. He met with Mary Sue Hubbard a couple of times at the property, and he also supervised some still photography work there. But it was very clear that he was growing progressively more paranoid, and also that in real life terms he had more reason to, because of the escalation of the litigation against him in the organization and the IRS case, which was then going to trial in the next year or so.
What did all this mean effectively for his control of the organization?
Well, the possibility of communicating with Hubbard diminished during that period. He continued to control the organization as he wanted via the messengers. But the organization could not admit to there being any kind of communication with him, because if they admitted to being able to communicate with Hubbard, then those litigants would be able to effect service of process, and Hubbard would be drawn into the case. So we all had to lie about being able to communicate with Hubbard, and as a result, communications with him dropped off a lot. So his ability to directly communicate with and control the organization dropped off a lot during that period, and continued to drop off over the next couple of years.
So was Miscavige Hubbard's chosen successor, and how did he compare to Hubbard?
I don't know if he was Hubbard's chosen successor, but he compares in a lot of ways. He compares in the belligerence. He compares in the way I perceive that he has dealt with his conscience. A key aspect of understanding Hubbard is to know that he attempted through his own will to obliterate his own conscience. And I think that Miscavige is following. Miscavige understands that. Miscavige understands that lust for power and that determination to dominate other people. And in that, he's very similar to Hubbard.
So at the end, what was Hubbard like by the end? You proofread Battleship Earth. You know, what did that show you, Stanislaw?
I think that from the time I first met Hubbard in 1971 through when I left the organization at the end of 1981, there was a clear diminishing of his powers, or the way he perceived his powers, and a withdrawal into himself. And I think that the fact that he devoted much of his final years to writing what is really quite childish science fiction shows that he had regressed into himself, and indeed into his childhood, into his early years as a science fiction writer.
Yes. And as you know, he experimented his use with the occult, black arts. Was there any evidence of that in his later life?
The organization has made the claim that Hubbard was sent into the John Parsons black magic ring to break it up. But he really was involved. He really was involved in magic rituals, black magic rituals. He wrote about it. He wrote his own rituals, and his own writings indicate the same determination that was articulated by Aleister Crowley. That is the determination to use his own will. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law.